Mike, I don't even think I can have a really good intro. I just found out for Dylan Moses, I referenced Noah's Ark. So I think I had the wrong biblical story going on there. So I won't do that to my man Baron Browning today. So how you doing?
Yeah, I thought you were going to talk about part of the Red Sea, and you started talking about going 2 by 2 onto a boat. I don't know what's going on there, but no, we have we have another prospect that is certainly interesting, if not more so interesting than Dylan Moses here in Baron Browning, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Getting into his background, the one thing that you're going to see right away is sort of comparatively to the rest of the class, his statistical production was not quite on par with the other guys. He played in quite a few games compared to some of them. But man, you just didn't see a lot of tackles. You did see an occasional sack here and there. But for somebody who doesn't drop back in coverage, the zero INTs is obviously a little bit questionable. Mike, what are your thoughts on overall just the statistical picture here that Browning presents?
Yeah, nothing really sticks out. And I think that's pretty evident in just everything here. And I think it kind of goes along with the way we're going to be grading him. Not trying to jump the gun a little bit, but just nothing's, in the finishing department or just IQ awareness. I think it's lacking sometimes. I think he puts himself in some bad positions. And I think also Ohio State used him in a little bit of a funky role. And I don't think that put him in the best position to make plays. So, but I think that really shows here. I think the one kind of outlier would be that 2019 season where he had 43 total tackles, 11 being for loss. I think that kind of sticks. They had 5 sacks. So
Yeah,
I think that kind of just shows you the versatility, the way that Ohio State used him. And I'm not sure a lot of the times it was for to use his skills to the best.
well, that's what I was going to say. I thought the 2019 stood out because of the 5 sacks. Like I didn't see any of that on the 2020 film. I didn't, getting into the grade, I did not see somebody who was shedding blocks and really even playing in the box at a high percentage of his snaps. Right, a lot of the times he was outside, kind of wind up in that Owusu nickel cornerback slash safety type role, where obviously they just take the will linebacker and send him out to the sidelines, which I went on a huge rant on in that video. Obviously, if you haven't seen that, click the link above my head. But he kind of plays the same position in that regard. And I think, like Mike said, that kind of slights him in terms of just already being out of 50% of plays before they even start. In terms of his range and pursuit, though, I thought he was relatively solid. Again, not quite to the caliber of the other guys, but particularly in his pursuit. I thought sometimes his angles could be a little bit questionable, which I think sort of correlates with the lackluster tackle production, but the range is most certainly there in terms of athletically. You look at his pro day, a 4.58 40-yard dash, a 40-inch vertical, a 10-10 broad jump, 23 reps on bench, right? We're looking at a guy who is a freak athletically and can most certainly play sideline to sideline. Just got to clean up some of the angles in that regard. In terms of his coverage skills, I would say to this point, he's been the second best in coverage so far. Not necessarily to the level of maybe an elite player, but I did think that he showed a lot of comfortability just playing sort of with his back to the ball, whether it was in man coverage or dropping back and sort of flipping his hips and running with guys in zone. I saw he did a very good job there. Was probably the second most comfortable in space of all the guys that we've seen so far, obviously behind Owusu, but very solid if you're going to draft him as a 4-3 will linebacker, which we'll talk about later, but I think Mike and I are on the same page that that's where he probably should be. In terms of block shedding, I did not see the 23 reps on bench. I really didn't see much physicality at all in his game, if we're being quite honest. That's certainly the lowest block shedding grade that I've given anybody to this point. And again, maybe part of it is because of his proximity to the ball, but even when he was in the box and occasionally when he was lined up off the edge, I just didn't quite see him doing much at all of anything to get off of blocks. In terms of his IQ and awareness, I think, like Mike kind of said, sometimes against the run, it could be pretty questionable, just sort of in terms of those angles, in terms of correctly reading, what type of block is a lineman doing and how does that tell me where the ball is going, right? Okay, if a tackle's down blocking, the ball's probably going outside of him. I didn't think he did a great job there, although I will say in pass coverage, I thought the IQ and awareness was there in terms of passing guys off from as they're entering into his zone, leaving his zone, et cetera, et cetera. I thought he was solid there. Quickness and change of direction. I felt like he was one of the best that you could possibly be, right? Sort of a missile in that regard. However, at the same time, as important as acceleration is, We've talked about it before, but you also have to be able to de-accelerate when you get to that sort of contact point and it's time to bring down the ball carrier, right? If you're just flying in like a missile against some of these elusive and agile running backs, you're going to end up flying right past them in that regard. And I just felt like he would do that from time to time, as you see with the 6 out of 10 on finishing and tackling. Otherwise, a good motor. I felt like he certainly played hard. As well as had good marks in terms of his size and athleticism. Surprised me on the size, 6'2.5", 245. I did not see that. He played significantly smaller in my eyes than those sort of measurements suggest. But either way, a 3.75 is pretty solid. So, Mike, thoughts on the general grade? Higher, lower? Where are you at on Browning?
Right where I'm at with him, I just moved some points. I think range and pursuit, especially coming off Chaz, the smooth jazz band, I think I'd knock that grade down a little bit. Um, Probably block shedding. I don't know if I totally agree with you. I don't know if I seen him shed a block, but like I think there's ability there. He does come like a missile. So if he could just hone that in a little bit, as you said, learn to de-accelerate. Sometimes maybe if he doesn't have the strength, learn to kind of bob and weave, bend a little bit to get around those blocks coming his way. I think there might be a little bit more potential there, but all in all, I really agree with the grade. Just a couple points I'd move here and there, but raw grade would be right around a 74.5.
No, I know that's kind of interesting that you bring up his bend because, when Ohio State would use him off the edge, it felt like he did a good job of getting kind of around the tackle's hips and clearing the edge, but there wasn't much bend actually, at least in my opinion. It felt like there were a lot of opportunities for him to potentially get pressures and get sacks, but he really just didn't do so because tackles were pretty much able to, as long as they had a hand on him, just push him by as he couldn't really fight through contact. So that's interesting that you bring up the bend. It maybe wasn't as good as I would have hoped considering his other sort of athletic traits, but I do agree that there's other ways he could get around that lack of physicality when it comes to taking on blocks. Otherwise, in terms of the big board, overall, what you're going to see is just below Nick Bolton, right? And, kind of unlike Bolton, whereas we said we didn't really know what he did great, what I would argue is that Baron Browning does do one thing very well, but he also does some other stuff pretty bad, right? And obviously bad is a relative term compared to, yeah, he does it great compared to some of the future linebackers we're going to talk about, but compared to the top linebackers, I mean, his ability to play in the box and just take on blockers was just not there. So that's why I do think that, as we were going to talk about here, I do think that Will Roll is best suited for him, right? Where he's on the backside and can use more of that athleticism to avoid guys opposed to just taking them on head on, right? Mike, do you agree with that as well as his overall positioning here on the big board?
Absolutely. Right with position, right below Bolton. I think he fits best at that linebacker spot, so it kind of limits him to a 4-3. I don't really see his fit in a 3-4 type defense. Um, but I think there's a role for him. I think, a lot of, knock for a lot of linebackers is ability to pass coverage, ability to pass coverage, ability to pass coverage. You hear that all the time. Um, and it just so happens that's what he does well, and the rest of it's kind of questionable. So he definitely has a role in this league, whether it be as a third down linebacker early on. Maybe he can develop some of those skills, some IQ awareness, just being able to see the play develop in front of him. But I think that's right. I think the grade's fine, and I think right below Bolton is right where he belongs.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because, I would agree that he doesn't necessarily have a ton of play in a 3-4 based on what he showed at Ohio State. But you look at those numbers, those just physical measurements, and at nearly 6'3", 245, that can do 23 reps on bench and run a 4.58, right? Like I could almost see a 3-4 team drafting him to maybe not be the Mike, but be that other interior middle linebacker, perhaps one that drops a little bit deeper in coverage and does those things, whereas the other one's more of a downhill run defender. I wouldn't be shocked if you see a team draft him kind of more as a developmental project in that regard, just considering he does have a pretty unique skill set concerning the guys surrounding him, right? You aren't going to, and you don't see a lot of coverage linebackers, coverage centric linebackers, I should say, in this sort of middle second to third round range. So I wouldn't be shocked if a team, regardless of scheme, took a chance on him. I would just say that, at least in my opinion, he needs to be in a 4-3 to best get the fullest out of his potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think something worth mentioning is he played in the Big Ten. He played against some big time offenses. I think he's been in, especially playing for Ohio State with the Buckeyes. He's played in big time games, in big time moments, and he's made some good plays. I think I watched the Clemson, and he had a couple plays on Trevor Lawrence, which I think were impressive. So, not a bad player at all. And if you think we're impressive, and you think we have potential, you know what you should do? Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us reach our full potential. Let's get to 100 subscribers. We're trying, we're getting there. I think we're at 84 right now. Be 85. Special, have a big part of Fiesta. Woohoo! But I'm just kidding. But we're trying. Hope you guys enjoy the videos. And with that, Mike, you got anything?
No, I think we're mic'd up, and now we're micing out. Peace, guys.
Deuces.